In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna bid on here now. Who bid $500,000 bid?
Welcome to the Legacy of Agriculture. This program will explore the past, present, and future of agriculture. We'll look at the people, products, and events that have formed its history. And now with today's guest, your host, Chris Bair.
Hello, everybody. This is Chris Bair, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor, Pfeiffer Auction and Realty. And if you're listening to this show on the radio and can't listen to the show in its entirety, you can go to legacyofagriculture.com, Apple or Spotify, and excited to announce that we're now have a YouTube channel called The Legacy of Agriculture, so you can go there. My special guest and long time, probably 10 years or 12 years, Ericka Heiser from Heiser Valuation, just outside of the Sioux City area, has joined me here today. Good morning, Ericka. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great.
It's good to see you.
Likewise.
You've got a little bit of a tan, so I've got a feeling you've been outside the area for a while.
I have been.
On vacation.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. I know that you are super busy. I'm excited to hear about your story and how you've been a leader in the valuation business, and also your expertise in the valuation business and how important the valuation business is to agriculture. We eat, breathe, and think agriculture. I was born and raised on a farm and have been in agriculture all of my life, and so I absolutely love agriculture. So tell me, you actually started out of college. You got into the banking industry for almost 12 years.
I did.
And then tell us a little bit about your journey in adulthood and how you wound up being a leader in the valuation business.
By luck. How about that? Yeah, I was in the banking industry for a long time. And then I had an opportunity to move over into valuation world. I'll be honest, I didn't even know what that was when I took the job. It was a great organization that I had an opportunity to work with and a wonderful mentor. And that was really exciting to me to try something new and use my education a little bit more and a new adventure.
You have a master's degree.
I do.
In?
Business administration. So what led you from the banking world into the valuation business? Well, again, luck. I had an opportunity to take this job with a great organization, and I was ready to get out of the banking industry. It's a wonderful industry, but I was just ready to move on. And so there really is not that big of a leap to go from banking into business valuation. I mean, it's all, a lot of it is economics, buying and selling, understanding what is going on with current events and the world, and strong with math.
Lots of math.
I'm a kind of a math nerd.
You're a math girl.
Yeah.
We'll call you math girl.
Yeah.
Well, that's really exciting. You were out in the Black Hills for a long time.
Yes, my husband and I lived in the Black Hills for 20 years. Actually, he was there a little longer than I was. And it was then that I took an opportunity to learn the valuation business. And I had a wonderful mentor out there. I was with them 14, 15 years. And then my family and I decided to relocate back to my home area, Sioux City, Iowa. And I'm close to my sisters and my parents. And it's been wonderful. Obviously, I'll always miss the Black Hills and love South Dakota, but
it's beautiful out west.
It sure is, but nothing beats being by your mama, does it?
No,
yeah.
Absolutely not. Enjoy her.
Yes, for sure.
So lots of people don't understand what a valuation business is and how that affects agriculture. I do, because I do appraisals in my other world and do valuations as well, on not nearly at the level that you do valuations. But your business is very, very important to the agricultural industry. Define what a valuation business is and how that could be important to our listeners.
Yeah, so I'll give you a broad brush. Business valuation or business appraisals. It's important to note it's not appraising real estate. It's not appraising equipment. I leave that hard work up to you and your colleagues. But it's valuing an entity, whether it's a corporation or a partnership, LLC. And I do this work for a lot of different industries, but one of my favorite ones is in agriculture. We can talk a little bit about that. I'm kind of a farm kid. I grew up in town, but still kind of a farm kid. We can talk
You know
about
what a
that.
cow is and a plow is, right?
I rode
a
bean buggy. If you remember that, a bean buggy. Yes, I did. Where you spray the weeds going through the bean. Yes, it was like the next step after walking beans.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
So, but I got
right.
to ride anyway. So, So there are families that contribute their farmland to a family limited partnership or an LLC. Hopefully not a corporation, but a whole other conversation.
Sometimes that happens. It's
Sometimes
a reality.
it happens, and it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. That's fine. When families contribute their farmland, ranch land, ag land to an entity, sometimes they want to gift, sometimes they want to sell. When a business owner passes away, that entity needs to be appraised for his or her estate tax return. Usually, not always. Lots of asterisks, and it depends in this conversation. But someone like me needs to appraise what is that unit or share of stock of that family limited entity worth for those purposes. And that's where I come into play.
So when you look at a project or an undertaking, you're looking at solely, most of the time, is ABC Farms has 3 partners, and something has happened. Maybe a partner is wanting to get bought out or is wanting to sell his share, or 2 of them want to sell it to the other partner. That's where you really come into play, is as you go in, take the ongoing the ongoing affairs of the business, and you can put a value on that share of the business for the partners, for everybody.
Yeah, for the partners, for maybe mom and dad, or gifting to son and daughter, for example. But yes, that's exactly right. And it's really twofold. Some people would say, well, the entity owns 10,000 acres and it's worth, $1,000 a share. And so we just simply divide that, multiply that times the percentage that is owned. That's really not the case. And I think we get into trouble there when we make it that simplistic, because any true individual who's in the ag business understands that that's great if that's the land that you own, but you have to look at cash flow, right? You can't eat the dirt.
It's not just the value of the asset. It's the value of the ongoing business.
Of the cash flow. That's exactly right. And that is a critical component to understanding the true value.
The importance of having this type of business and needing this type of business is just plain establishing the value for the partners that are participating, or sometimes it's just a dissolution of a marriage as well, too.
Sometimes it's dissolution of marriage. Not often, but sometimes it is. I would say the majority of the work that I do in the ag industry, in the ownership of land, I should say,
right.
Ag is so diverse, is in the estate and gift arena.
Yep, that's right. Well, Ericka, we're coming down to the end of our first segment. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Heiser Auction and Realty, for sponsoring the Legacy of Agriculture. For a complete listing of all of the 2024 auctions coming this spring and into early fall, you'll want to go to pifers.com. That's PIFERS.com, or call us 605-836-2277. Nobody does it better.
This is Kyle, equipment sales representative with Pifers Auction and Realty. Pifers is proud to provide the best seller experience around. From start to finish, our trained equipment representatives will make sure the right decisions are made to get the most money from your new or used equipment. We believe that knowledge is power, and our reps provide you with the current market estimates to help better understand machinery values. If you want to sell machinery, then nobody does it better.
Hey folks, we're back in our second segment. This is your host, Chris Bair of the Legacy of Agriculture, and my good friend, and oftentimes coworker Ericka Heiser has joined me in studio today to talk about the valuation business, and how she does valuations. And in the first segment, we kind of defined what the valuation business does. But I think more importantly, Ericka, let's talk about an example of somebody needing your services. I know that you not only do you service the ag industry, but there's many other industries that you service. Can you give me an example of a working example of what you've done to help your clients?
Sure. Yeah. And just to note, some other industries that I work in are hospitality, medical, manufacturing, retail, service. So it's pretty vast and it's pretty fun to be able to be diverse, but ag is...
That's a lot.
Certainly fun. It's fun.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
That's
fun.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so let's talk about the situation of perhaps mom and dad owned land, and quite a bit of land, and concerned maybe that mom and dad are going to have to pay some estate tax.
Okay.
And so mom and dad contribute the land with the help of an attorney, with the help of your accountant. Those are my disclaimers.
Should we clarify that you are not providing legal counsel?
I am not.
Just valuation.
Right. It's certainly something to have a conversation. It works for some people beautifully, and it is a nightmare and bad idea for others. It's very specific to dollar amount that we're talking about. So, yes, seek additional professional help.
That's exactly right. From an accountant and or an attorney.
Correct. But let's say it makes sense for this family for mom and dad. They're going to have an estate issue to contribute their real estate to an entity. Let's call it a partnership. A limited partnership that they've contributed their land to. Mom and dad own all of it. Over time, mom and dad decide to gift partnership units, kind of like stock, to their kids over time. And then the goal would be possibly the goal is to get mom and dad out of that ownership altogether, to get the partnership units into kids' estates so that the wealth grows within their children's estates and out of their estate.
And save on taxes.
So potentially save on taxes.
Potentially.
Yes, potentially.
Okay.
And so when mom and dad decide to gift to kids, let's say they want to gift 10% to each child, I would appraise or value that 10% interest. And in the first segment, we started to talk about this a little bit, where it's not just simply saying, well, the value of the real estate is worth $10 million. We're probably talking about maybe bigger dollars than this, but for simplistic sake and to be able to do a little bit of math in my head, we simply wouldn't take 10% of $10 million and say that's what it's worth, because son and daughter, as a 10% owner, cannot force liquidation. They can never get access to the value of that $10 million as a 10% owner.
That is correct.
They're a minority owner, and so we have to look at really what is the cash flow? What's the value based on cash flow from this business as well? Because that's really all they're going to get is
correct
cash flow. However, the IRS gets a little bit sticky about this and say, you also kind of have to look at the asset approach as well, looking at the value of the real estate, because that value could be unlocked at some point in their lifetime. When I look at the asset approach, the value of the underlying ground, and the cash flow value, I weight the two. It's called a weighted approach.
Okay.
And that's been successful in a number of IRS court cases that really, I think, works to economic reality of what is this truly worth to a 10% owner. We simply can't just look at the cash flow and ignore the underlying asset, that $10 million piece of ground, because that plays a role as well. And so we weight the two.
So not only do you look at the value from an asset standpoint, but you also look at the business really, and I'm kind of going in layman's terms, kind of alley terms, is that if that business generates, say, $500,000 worth of income every year, or $300,000 or whatever that number is, you can take a projection of that income and establish the value based on its income earning potential currently and in the future. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that value is derived by employing the income approach. Okay.
Sure.
Not to get too far into the weeds here, but yeah, if that business generates, let's say, $500,000 in cash flow on an annual basis, we use a risk rating, a capitalization rate, to determine what the value is of that, assuming that runs into perpetuity. Now, in ag, we have to understand that maybe it was a really good year, and that's why cash flows are $500,000. But we also have to recognize that some year commodity prices are down. Some years fuel is really high. And we have to recognize that volatility is just the nature of agriculture. And so looking at just one year and saying cash flow of $500,000 is the number, I would argue we need to look at perhaps a 5-year average and incorporate the highs and the lows and capture that volatility.
Yeah, in agriculture, especially in agriculture, it can be as long as a 10 or a 15-year average, because it seems like we're always in about a 10-year cycle or a 15-year cycle in agriculture, because it takes so much time for the water to flow under the bridge and get rid of the lows, and pretty soon you come into the highs, and then there's just a lot of ebb and flow that goes with agriculture, and sometimes that's a fairly slow-moving train. Sometimes.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. The IRS requires me to look at 5 years. Okay. So that's what I look at. Doesn't mean that I will always use a 5-year average, but I have to at least analyze 5 years.
5 years.
I would say usually, unless something's really different, for example, maybe the 5 years ago, they still had livestock. And then in 2019 or 2020, they decided to get out of livestock. And so their business in 2019 is not really what their business is now and won't be going forward. That would be a reason to exclude 2019, for example.
Sure, absolutely.
So
when you get down to the end of these valuations, and we just got a couple of minutes left in this segment, when you get down to the end of the valuation, you're hoping to be able to tell your client that your portion of this business, this 10% is the number that we've used in this segment, is worth X number of dollars based on the income approach, the value of the assets. You've taken into consideration 4 to 5 years worth of highs and lows, and then you arrive at a number and are able to give your client a number as to what that the value of that business is. And sometimes it's just for tax purposes, but sometimes it's for liquidation purposes or transfer of ownership. Am I pretty close?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it's not just a number, but I would put that into a report, and I would write about that. In narrative format, I would write about that and tell the reader, why would I only use 4 years? Why did I use 5 years? Why is the weighting of the income approach this and the asset approach that? Why not flip-flopped? So it's a lot of narrative, and one should be able to read that report and have it really make sense, and it should tell a story.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Ericka, we're coming down to the end of our second segment. Really quickly, and we'll repeat this at the end of our fourth segment, but how do they get a hold of you at Heiser Valuation Services? Yeah,
so you can check out my website, and it's Heiser Valuation. Heiser, Heiser, and valuation starts with a V as in Victor. So it's not evaluation, it's valuation. So heiservaluation.com. My phone number's in there, my email address is in there, and you can read all about all the services.
All right, that sounds great. We're coming down to the end of our second segment. We're going to be back with our third segment in just a minute. This is Chris Bair, the host of The Legacy of Agriculture. We're going to be right back.
This is Jasmine with Pfeiffer's Auction and Realty. We have a great lineup of machinery and farm sales this spring. Many of them already have listings available on our website. If you're looking to buy land or machinery, go to www.pifers.com to see a complete catalog of our auctions. It's updated daily, so make sure to check back in with us and find the perfect lot for you. When it comes to auctions, nobody does it better.
Hey folks, this is Chris Bair, your host of The Legacy of Agriculture, and my good friend Ericka Heiser from Heiser Valuation in Sioux City is joining me in studio to talk about the valuation business. And we had a great conversation in the second segment, Ericka, about what you do in your valuations. But there's one thing that I think is vitally important, and we always like to give good information to our listeners, even though this program is about history, but it's also about giving information and helping our listeners that might be approaching the retirement stage or thinking that even in 10 years or 15 years, they're going to retire. Some people just forget to plan for the inevitable. And so one of the things that I have found in my 30-plus year career is communication, especially amongst family members. So let's go down that road. And what would you encourage our listeners to talk about, first of all, kindly with each other? Tell us a little bit about it.
I always think communication. I mean, it's just so critical. I think it's really important for... And I guess I'm talking about a farm operation or an ag that they own the real estate. I mean, that's really what it is. But this is in pretty much any industry across the board, but specifically with ag. What do we do with the land, right?
Correct.
And so I think it's very important for kids, adult kids. My mom and dad would call me a kid. What do mom and dad want us to do? What do they want us to do? And so we can best play out their wishes while they're still living and after they're gone. Hopefully that's decades and decades away, right? But having that conversation, I think oftentimes I hear my clients say, it's my, an 80-year-old dad, it's my land, and I don't have to tell anybody what I want to do with it. And that's fine. You don't. You absolutely do not.
However, if he doesn't even want to tell anybody, he still needs to have a will, and he needs to have a plan so that when he's gone, or he or she or both mom and dad are gone, they know what their wishes are, because it's theirs. It's theirs to do with it.
It is theirs, but if we have 80-year-old dad, we might have 50 or 60-year-old son working on the farm, making a meager wage to run operations and having absolutely no idea when is this his or hers, and what's the plan here. It makes it really difficult for the next generation to do their own financial planning. Without doing some estate planning, it could set up that estate to be painful upon passing.
Yeah, because the state takes control of the estate.
Yeah, and having a conversation with family and having a conversation with an estate planner, an estate attorney, and really good accountant is critical. At least having the conversations and making some plans about what to do. I have seen some horror stories where mom and dad don't want to talk about this. They've done no planning and they pass away owning all of the land, and it's $40 or $50 million. And the tax on that is so staggering. It's a shame. The mom and dad want the land to go to the kids anyway. Let's do some planning.
Or
let's have these conversations.
Determine who the heirs of the estate will be. That's
Correct.
What's most important.
Correct. And, they're just like valuation analysts like myself. There are good ones. There are not so good ones. There are good estate attorneys. There are not so good estate attorneys. My recommendation, have a conversation with 2 or 3 or 4. Understand what they plan for you and kind of get a feel for their personality. It should be with someone that you want to plan your end game with, right?
Sure.
I mean, you've worked your entire life for this.
So if you're a child, if you're a child, and it doesn't matter if your mom and dad's 80 years old, and you're 60 years old, you're still their kid.
You're still the baby.
And you haven't had that conversation with mom and dad. How do you start that conversation with them?
That's a tricky one. But I think when it comes from a place of love.
Sure.
And let's make sure we can do everything we can to keep this real estate within the family and keep your legacy, what you've started, continuing on years and years after you're gone.
And that's what it is. It's a legacy.
It is a huge legacy. But those conversations really need to be had. I do sometimes inviting someone as a consultant, someone like me. Oftentimes I don't have really strong relationships with the owners of the land. Usually I have a strong relationship with the estate attorney or with their accountant. And they bring me in to just do a specific role. And so, but I respect the relationships that I have with the accountant and the attorney, and I do my very best to nurture the relationship and take excellent care of their ultimate client. But sometimes I am able to ask some of those pointed questions of what are your plans when you're gone? What are your plans if mom goes first? What are your plans if you're incapacitated? Have you thought about what the tax implications are if you don't do some tax planning now? How is your family going to keep that land? If you can't answer some or all of these questions, you have work to do. And that's okay, because there are people there to help you. It's all right.
But what the professionals are for, to help in that process. But
we don't have to wait till mom and dad are 80 or 90. People pass away in their 50s and their 60s. You just never know. It's not too early.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that level of communication, as we're coming down to the end of our third segment, that level of communication is absolutely vital between mom and dad, the landowners, even if it's a partner, that communication between two partners that have amassed a large estate. It has to happen in all business situations, because you just never know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't enter into a business arrangement with your best friend and not have a buy-sell agreement. You take care of your family business as well.
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly right.
For sure.
Hey, folks, we're coming down to the end of our third segment. We appreciate our sponsor, Pfeiffer Auction and Realty. You can go to our website at pfers.com. We'll be right back.
This is Kyle, equipment sales representative with Pfeiffer's Auction and Realty. Pfeiffer's is proud to provide the best seller experience around. From start to finish, our trained equipment representatives will make sure the right decisions are made to get the most money from your new or used equipment. We believe that knowledge is power, and our reps provide you with the current market estimates to help better understand machinery values. If you want to sell machinery, then nobody does it better.
Hello, folks. This is Chris Bair, your host of The Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and here at the radio station. My good friend, Ericka Heiser from Heiser Valuations is here. Thank you again, Ericka, for joining us. I want to talk a little bit about the magnitude of agriculture just in the three-state region. So we're right down here in southeast South Dakota. You could throw a rock into Iowa, and you could throw another rock to the south, and you're into Nebraska. There's over 895 million acres farmed in the United States. Is that a staggering number?
Yes.
So Nebraska ranks number 4 with 44.8 million acres. South Dakota follows Nebraska as number 5 in the nation with 43.2 million acres. And then in Iowa ranks number 10 in the United States with 30.5 million acres. So between the two of them, that constitutes about 15% of all of the farm ground that's farmed of the almost 900 million acres that's farmed in the United States. So as we know, farmland doesn't transact. Sometimes it transacts 10 years, 20 years, but we've seen some farms that have been in a family for 5 generations. Mm-hmm. That could be 120 years. And so if you have a piece of farm ground that's been passed down from generation to generation, and you're 5 generations down, and great-great-grandpa paid $25 an acre for it, or got it on a government federal land grant or something like that, and all of a sudden, and we've seen land values just a couple of months ago, Pifer sold a piece of farm ground up in North Dakota that we think broke all the North Dakota records of over $17,000 an acre. Now, I will guarantee you over 100 years ago, that was probably $25 an acre ground. A few weeks ago, Scott Bachmeyer was on, and Scott's younger than I am. And when he came out of college, he had the opportunity to buy some North Dakota farm ground out of college for $96 an acre, went to his banker. His banker says $96 an acre will never cash flow. Well, you fast forward 25 years, and that same farm ground's trading for $3,500, $4,000 an acre. All of a sudden, there's some questions that have to be answered when that land finally transacts out of the family's name, whether it gets sold to a neighbor, whether it gets sold to a corporation, whether it's developed into commercial or residential ground. There's a lot of questions, and that's really where you come into this, and where your services are needed is trying to establish that value. And now what do we do with the value of this land, and how do we handle this with the IRS? How do we put this into estate planning? Is that pretty fair value analysis?
You know, it is, and I think it gets to be a little bit tricky, especially where we are right now, starting out in early 2024. You know, the estate limit is pretty high right now, and I know I should know it off the top of my head, but I don't, because it just went up, but it's high. But that law is getting ready to sunset at the end of 2025, and so if you're in that, $2 million to, $3-4 million area right now, you don't have really much to worry about if you pass before the end of 25, because it's, what is it, 15 million or something like that right now. It's
I think
high.
It's considerably
15,
higher
16.
with a married couple. Yes.
Yeah. But that's going to sunset at the end of 25. And so right now you have nothing to worry about if you're in that $2 to $4 million range. But if you're waiting another 2 years, there could be a problem. At least have a conversation. Start having conversations with estate attorneys, and don't expect to get an appointment with an estate attorney next week. I mean, they're booked out. The good ones are booked out
for a long time.
Yeah, and there doesn't hurt to have second opinions, and ask some questions and make sure that the advice you're getting is good advice. And so, it really affects anybody who's in agriculture and who owns even a little bit of land, because when you're talking $17,000 an acre, it doesn't take very many acres before you start getting over that $2-3 million mark.
Especially if you want to keep it in the family.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. Who knows what's going to happen at the end of 2025, what Congress is going to do? I don't know. No one knows.
I don't think anybody knows what
I don't think they know.
Get
your crystal ball out, right? Just be ready and be able to have those conversations soon.
Now, just for a quick minute, I also want to let our listeners know that you oftentimes can testify in court as an expert witness on valuations and how you determine your values. And you've had quite a bit of court experience too.
I have, primarily in the marital dissolution or divorce arena, but also with shareholder dissension. Shareholders fight. Somebody wants out. Somebody's not getting a fair shake, or don't think they're getting a fair shake, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I have done that.
Especially minority owners in any type of a business.
Especially minority owners, right?
So we're coming down to the end of our fourth segment. We just got a couple of minutes left, Ericka. I want everybody to know how to get a hold of you, to go and to be able to make contact with you. They can contact you how?
Yeah. So again, check out my website. It's heiservaluation.com. HEISER valuation, starts with a V.com. From there, you can find my email address, which is Ericka@heiservaluation.com. And I'll spell that because my parents got a little crazy. Hi, Mom. Ericka, ERICKA @HeiserValuation.com. So Ericka@heiservaluation.com. Or you can call me 605-390-4611. When you look at my website, you are able to read not only about the services that I offer, but I also have a tab where you can read some of the articles that I have written. There is one that I wrote specifically about agriculture and valuing minority interests of closely held farm and ranch entities. And I have spoken on that topic nationally twice, and I oftentimes have people call me after that and want to talk about that a little bit more. I think it's it's a fun topic and one that I just really, really love. And they make me work. Those are hard calculations, and I really have to use my brain to do those. But I think it really makes economic reality make some sense there. So you can read some articles that I wrote about succession planning in all industries, read a little bit about ag, and read about the services that I offer. And if listeners think maybe they have a valuation need and aren't quite sure, call me, shoot me an email. I can tell you this is not my wheelhouse, but maybe I can recommend somebody that could be able to help.
And you can also recommend professional services to attorneys and accountants that are also in the business that know how to handle estate planning and those type of professionals as well. Right. Thank you, Ericka, very much for joining us. This is Chris Bair, your host of The Legacy of Agriculture. We'll be right back next week with another show, The Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us.
In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm been on here now, who bid $500,000 bid.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Legacy of Agriculture with Chris Bair, sponsored by Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Call Pfeiffer's at 605-836-2277.